the dangerous comfort of saying, I'll do it later. You tell yourself you'll do it later, not because you don't care, but because right now feels too heavy. That message, that task, that decision, you gently push it forward in time. And for a moment, you feel relief. But have you noticed later never really comes the way you expect it to? Problem deep dive. It starts small. You delay replying to a message. You postpone starting something important. You tell yourself you'll begin when you feel ready. But readiness never arrives the way you imagined. Instead, something else grows. A quiet pressure in the background of your mind. A subtle tension that follows you through the day. You try to relax, but there's always that unfinished thing, sitting somewhere behind your thoughts. So you distract yourself, scrolling, watching, doing smaller, easier tasks. And the strange part is, you're not lazy. You actually care a lot. That's why it weighs on you. The more you delay, the more your identity starts to shift. You begin to see yourself as someone who avoids, someone who can't follow through. And your brain starts reinforcing that story, not consciously, but through repetition. Each time you say later, you're not just delaying an action, you're practicing a pattern. And that pattern slowly becomes who you believe you are. But why does your mind choose this? Even when it clearly makes things worse. Reframe. Here's the part most people misunderstand. This isn't a failure of discipline. It's not a lack of motivation. It's something much older than that. Your brain is trying to protect you from discomfort, from uncertainty, from the possibility of failure. So when you say, I'll do it later, you're not being careless. You're regulating your emotions. In the moment, delay feels like relief. And your brain learns something very important from that. Avoiding this makes me feel better. So it repeats it, not because it's good for you, but because it works in the short term. And that's where the trap begins. Psychological mechanism. There's a simple system at play here. Your brain constantly tries to minimize discomfort and maximize immediate relief. This is rooted in behavioral psychology, specifically something called negative reinforcement. When you avoid something stressful, your anxiety drops, even just a little. That drop becomes a reward, and your brain remembers. Next time this feeling appears to void again, think of it like this. Your brain is a heat-sensitive system. Whenever something feels too hot emotionally, uncertain, overwhelming, or risky, it looks for the fastest way to cool it down. Avoidance is the fastest way. But here's the hidden cost. Every time you delay, you lower the emotional heat in the moment, but you increase the baseline temperature over time because the task doesn't disappear. It lingers, and your brain now has two problems instead of one, the task itself and the growing anxiety around it. There's also something from cognitive science called temporal discounting. Your brain values immediate comfort more than future benefit. So feeling okay now wins over feeling better later, even if later would actually be easier. This is why you choose short-term relief, even when you know it leads to long-term stress. And over time, your brain builds a mental shortcut. Discomfort, delay relief, a loop. And like any loop, it becomes automatic. But loops can be changed, not by force, but by understanding how they work. Practical framework. So instead of fighting yourself, you start working with your brain. Here are 5 steps to gently break the later loop. Step 1. Shrink the starting point. What to do? Make the task so small it feels almost pointless. Not finish the project. Just open the file. Why it works. Your brain resists emotional weight, not action itself. By reducing perceived difficulty, you bypass the threat response in your amygdala. Example, instead of study for 2 hours, you sit down and read just 1 page. And often, that's enough to continue. Step 2. Use time anchors, not motivation. What to do? Attach tasks to a specific time, not a feeling. Not when I feel ready, but at 4 p.m. Why it works. This reduces decision fatigue and removes reliance on fluctuating emotional states. Your prefrontal cortex prefers structure over ambiguity. Example, you reply to messages every day at a fixed time. Instead of waiting until you feel like it, Step 3, make avoidance visible. What to do? Write down what you're avoiding, not the task, but the feeling behind it, why it works. This activates metacognition, your ability to observe your own thoughts. It shifts activity from emotional brain regions to more rational processing. Example, you write, I'm not avoiding the task. I'm avoiding the fear of doing it badly. And suddenly it becomes clearer. Step 4, reward starting, not finishing. What to do? Give yourself credit for beginning, not for completing everything. Why it works? This retrains your brain's reward system. Instead of associating relief with avoidance, you associate satisfaction with action. Example, after starting a task, you take a break guilt-free, not because it's done, but because you showed up. Step 5, interrupt the loop. Early, what to do? Catch the moment you say later, and pause. Ask, what am I actually feeling right now? Why it works? This breaks the automatic behavior loop. You create a gap between impulse and action, a key concept in cognitive behavioral therapy. Example, instead of immediately postponing, you sit with the discomfort for 30 seconds, and often it's less intense than you expected. Integration. At its core, this isn't about productivity. It's about how your brain handles discomfort. You can think of it like this. Your mind is a negotiation system. One part wants long-term growth. The other wants immediate safety. And I'll do it later is the compromise between the two. But over time, that compromise becomes a habit. So the goal isn't to eliminate discomfort. It's to lower the cost of starting, to make action feel safer than avoidance. Because once you begin, the emotional weight often dissolves on its own. Quiet, empowering, close. Visual, person sitting quietly, looking out a window. You were never avoiding because you're incapable. You were avoiding because something felt too heavy, and your brain tried to protect you. But protection isn't always direction, and comfort isn't always harmless. Sometimes the most dangerous habit is the one that feels the safest. I'll do it later. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and consistent. And that's why it shapes your life. So maybe next time, you don't try to fix everything. You don't force motivation. You just begin a little earlier than usual. And that small shift might change more than you expect.